So some more, three more here. You can't see, so squeeze in. Good evening, everybody. Certainly when you think about some of the speeches or talks that you may have to say in your life, this is definitely one that you never ever wish you'd have to plan for. So a big thank you for everybody for coming. And a big thank you to our amazing family for looking after us over the past year. I think without all your amazing support, picking us up off the ground when we keep falling down, I think we would have certainly without trace. We've said on numerous occasions how Joshua connected with all the family and how everybody in the room always had a very special connection with Joshua. And that will never go. That will stay with us all, stay with you forever. So just over the next half an hour or so, our special guest from Hitchin High School. Everyone knows who it is. Alan's going to do a Batorah, and then Dahlia and Man are going to say a few words.
I grab a chair. I'm not going to sit for the whole thing.
We'll bring your chair with you.
Down in the chair.
Just before you miss the car. Sir, please, sir.
They have to see me, they can do it. It's not enough. How's that? Yeah, that's nice. Hello, fans at home. If I speak at this volume, can everyone in the back hear me?
Yes.
Super. Please feel free to interrupt me if you find what I'm saying boring. Hopefully everybody has been WhatsApped or Zoomed or whatever a link to some sources. If you have a phone or a tablet or something, it's on the massive family group, and I think Uncle Johnny shared them around as well. I would really encourage you to glance at the sources while we're going through this, because if you don't, it's going to be a lot of just listening to me. And the texts are more interesting than I am. All the sources are in English translation as well as in the originals. And for the sake of ease of access for everyone, I'm going to read them in English when we discuss them. And if you want to look at the original text as well as the Hebrew and Aramaic, then I'm more than welcome to do so. So the thing I want to speak about this evening is the life and times and teachings of a very famous personality in the rabbinic canon who goes by the name of Hillel. And the reason that I want to speak about the teachings of Hillel in particular are that one of the many themes that Josh touched on time and time again in the Torah that he shared was about love and loving people who belong to the Jewish people, loving people who are close to you in your life, how we show that love to friends and family, and how we can use Torah and how we can use Torah teaching as a vehicle for expressing that love. And the life of Hillel is a really amazing window into this message of how we can use Torah to share love with others, and also how the value of love changed the way that Hillel wanted Torah to be taught in the Jewish world, and this had an amazing impact on the entirety of Jewish history. One of Hillel's most famous teachings, which is the first source on our sheet, comes from chapter 1, Mishnah 11. And here Hillel said, these are of the most famous teachings of Hillel: be like the disciples of Aaron, that's Aaron, the Cohen, the high priest, loving peace and pursuing peace, loving mankind and drawing them close to the Torah. So in the final section of that quote, Hillel connects these two ideas of being somebody who loves other people, loves human beings, loves humanity, and brings them close to the Torah. The injunction, the commandment to love your fellow comes from chapter 19 of the book of Vayikra, a quote we all know very well, which is "Va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha ani Hashem." It's the second quote on the sheet. The very end of that long paragraph. There's a long list of things you shouldn't do, like robbing and insulting, slandering, and then at the very end it says, "Love your fellow as yourself and Hashem." Of the many interpretations of this commandment to love your fellow as yourself, Hillel gives us one of the most obvious, most basic explanations, but the context of it is in a really interesting or strange story. So we have a look at the third source on the sheet. It comes from the Gemara in Shabbat, and it forms part of a series of exchanges where Hillel is faced with strange questions by people who want to convert to Judaism. So there was another incident involving one Gentile who came before Shammai. And he said to Shammai is a scholar who's often one of the big rivals of Hillel, convert me on the condition that you will teach me the entire Torah when I'm standing on one foot. Shammai pushed him away with his builder's cubit in his hand. This is the standard length of instrument that was used to make certain building constructions and things like that. The same Gentile then came before Hillel, and Hillel converted him, and he said to him, that which is hateful to you, do not do to another. That is the entirety of the Torah. The rest is interpretation, go and study. So it's a story that I'm sure many of us are very, very familiar with. And on the first read, it is quite a nice one. Oh, really, all of Judaism is just being nice. Don't do something mean to someone else. That's what it means to be a good person, and then go and know the rest. But it is a really strange story. Because firstly, why is this convert coming up to famous rabbis and saying, teach me all of Judaism on one leg? Why is it that Hillel chooses this particular passage to share? And what does he mean? The rest is interpretation, go and study. How are these things all linked together? There's quite a lot of context to this story, and we'll look at the full account in the Gemara in Shabbat later on. But what I wanted to present tonight was hopefully a fairly brief overview of some of the famous episodes in Hillel's life to construct a bit of biography of him, and what his Judaism, what his Torah teachings meant, and that these will help us understand this famous episode in hopefully a little bit of a different light. The first story that I've chosen from Hillel's life comes from the Gemara in Masechet Yoma. I'm going to read it through in the English, beginning with our fourth source. They said about Hillel the elder, each day and every day he would work and earn half a dinar. He was a woodcutter by trade, so he was doing difficult manual labor. And half of this he would give to the guards of the study hall, and half of it he would spend for sustenance and the sustenance of the family. What this means is that he would have to pay an entrance fee to go to the Bet Midrash every day to study in the academies where he would learn Torah. So half of his annual wage, not that it was very much anyway, is going on this. One time, he didn't find employment to earn a wage, and the guard of the study hall didn't allow him to enter. He ascended to the roof and suspended himself there, and sat at the edge of the skylight in order to hear the words of Torah of the living God from the mouths of Shemaiah and Atalya, who were the leaders of that generation. The sages continued, and they said, that day was Shabbat Eve. It was the winter season of Teva, and snow fell upon him from the sky. When it was dawn, Shemaiah said to Atalya, Atalya, my brother, every day at this hour, the study hall is already bright from the sunlight, streaming through the skylight. And today it is dark. Is it perhaps a cloudy day? They focused their eyes and saw the image of a man in the skylight. They ascended and found him covered with snow 3 cubits high. They extricated him from the snow, and they washed him and smeared oil on him, and they sat him up opposite the bonfire to warm him up. And they said, here is a man who is worthy for us to desecrate Shabbat for him. The story again is a really nice one about Hillel's dedication to Torah and his commitment to wanting to be close to hearing the words of the sages, even when it was very, very difficult for him. The final words, though, are very, very puzzling. This is a person who is worthy for us to desecrate Shabbat for. We know that to save someone's life, obviously you can break Shabbat to help any person. So what does it mean that Hillel is somebody who is worthy to have Shabbat broken for him for? To find the answer, we have to move on to a slightly later episode in Hillel's life. And we might see that when the Gemara has written this earlier episode, it is looking forward to another episode later on in Hillel's life, where he assumes leadership of the Jewish people. This one comes from the Gemara in Pesachim on page 66a. The sages taught a Breita. A Breita is a teaching that was not included in the Mishnah. With regards to the basic law governing the eve of Passover when it falls on Shabbat, we can see it being already related there with Shabbat. The law was forgotten by the sons of the Terah, who were the leaders of that generation. The 14th of Nisan occurred on Shabbat, and they forgot, and they didn't know whether the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not. So the question is, if Shabbat falls and it's Pesach on the first night of Pesach on Shabbat, do you perform the normal sacrifice of the Korban Pesach, or do you not perform it? They didn't understand what the law was. They said, is there any person who knows whether the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not? And it was said to them, there is a man in Jerusalem who came up from Babylon, and his name is Hillel. At one point, he served the two most eminent scholars of the generation, Shemaiah and Atalya, and he certainly knows whether the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not. The sons of Terah sent messages and they called him. What follows after this is a long series of exchanges where Hillel proves that yes, absolutely, you do indeed offer the Korban on Shabbat. And there's long back and forth. And if we skip down a little bit later on to the underlined part where I put after Hillel brought all these proofs, they immediately seized him at the head and they appointed him the Nasi, that's the prince, the leader of the Jewish people over them. He expounded the laws of Passover for that entire day. And in the course of his teaching, he began rebuking them with his words. He said, what caused this to happen to you, that I should come from Babylon and become the prince over you? It was the laziness in you that did not serve the two most eminent scholars of your generation, Shemaiah and Atalya. They said to him, our teacher, if one forgot and did not bring a knife on the eve of Shabbat, and one cannot slaughter the Paschal lamb while is the law. Since he could have brought the knife before Shabbat, he cannot bring it on Shabbat. What should he do in this situation? He said to them, I once heard this halakha from my teachers, but I've forgotten it. Leave it to the Jewish people. If they are not the prophets to whom God has revealed his secrets, they are the sons of the prophets, and they will certainly do the right thing all on their own. The next day on Shabbat, it was the eve of Pesach, and one whose Paschal offering was a lamb, took the knife and stuck it in its wool. One whose Paschal offering was a goat, which does not have wool, stuck it between its horns. Hillel saw this incident, and he remembered the halakha that he had once learned. He said, this is the tradition I received from Shemaiah and Artalia, meaning that this was a proper course of action. Let's take these two stories together we've just heard. In the first story, Hillel, who is basically a nobody, and who can't even string together half a dinar worth of salary a day, nearly freezes to death just to try and access the Bet Midrash to hear Torah, which is the one thing he wants to do so much. The second story sees Hillel being rocketed towards the most important leadership of his generation, the most important position in the entire Jewish community. And the entire crux of his argument about how do we find out what the halakha is, how do we find out what the law is based on a really simple principle. When Hillel forgets the law, he says to the people around him, go and look at what the ordinary Jewish people do. Go out into the street and see what they do. This is the first instance, or one of the first instances, of a very important dictum in the Talmud, which is put Qazi or go and see. Often when it's unclear what the law is, the rabbis end up saying, well, let's just go out into the street and ask the average Jew what they do. Why is this such an important moment? Why was it so revolutionary? Well, it takes someone like Hillel, who was excluded from the Bet Midrash for so long, somebody who couldn't afford even to pay the entrance fees, who had to be freezed to death just to listen to words of Torah, to realize that one of the biggest problems within the rabbinic community at the time is their elitism, that they don't have enough of a sense of what the ordinary Jewish person is like. Hillel's revolution is that he is humble enough to think that the ordinary Jewish person has something really valuable to give to the study of Torah. And he's made the Prince Nasi over the entirety of the Jewish leadership at that time in order to advance that message. And he cements that at the core of his halakhic teaching. For Hillel, what is the most important thing is that the halakha is something everybody can follow, everybody can accept, and that when he's dispensing the law, he wants to see how it applies to ordinary people in their lives. This is why in that previous story, it ended with the phrase, this is a man worthy for us to desecrate Shabbat for. It wasn't talking about saving Hillel's life, but it was talking about how Hillel understood that the way to understand about that law of breaking Shabbat to offer the Korban Pesach was by looking to ordinary people and seeing what they did. So it's very much deploying that same logic. I've got quite a few more examples of Hillel using similar ideas to inform his halakhic decision making. I'm going to skip over the next one in the interest of time and continue with another story from the Gemara in Shabbat. So not the next source, but the one after on page 17a. This story involves Hillel and Shammai having another argument, and it escalates very, very quickly. So another of these decrees, things that Hillel and Shammai were arguing about. One who harvests grapes in order to take them to the press. Shammai says it becomes susceptible to contamination. So Shammai thinks that when you harvest grapes, that it prepares them to become ritually impure. Hillel disagrees and says it has not become susceptible. Hillel said to Shammai, if so, i.e. if you're right, Shammai, if these are going to become impure, for what purpose do we harvest grapes in purity? I.e., why is it common practice for us to take great care to use pure vessels when we harvest the grapes? If Shammai is correct, and actually they're going to become impure, then this wouldn't make sense at all. Again, this is a really clear example of Hillel understanding that what ordinary people do demonstrates the halakha. He's observed grape harvesters in their natural course of work, and he's used that piece of information about the real world to determine what the halakha should be. So from here, the situation kind of gets intense quite more quickly. We move over to the next paragraph. Shammai said to him, if you provoke me and insist that there is no difference between gathering olives and grapes, in order to contradict this, I will decree impurity on the gathering of olives as well. They related that since the dispute was so intense, they stuck a sword in the study hall, and they said, one who seeks to enter the study hall, let him enter. One who seeks to leave may not leave. So all the sages will be assembled to determine the halakha. On that same day, Hillel was bowed and was sitting before Shammai like one of the students, and the Gemara said, this day was so difficult for Israel as it was as difficult as the day the golden calf was made. Because Hillel, who was the Nasi, was forced to sit in submission before Shammai, and the opinion of Bet Shammai was made more important than Bet Hillel. Shammai and Hillel issued these decrees, and the people did not accept it from them. It was only when their students came and issued the decrees later that people accepted it from them. So we see here another instance of Hillel, firstly, using common knowledge, using the wisdom of the ordinary Jewish people for whom he had so much love to inform the halakha, and Shammai, who in this story represents the kind of fierce elitism or the academic sort of purity of the rabbinic schools, being so convicted in his view that he represents this with a physical metaphor of plunging the sword into the bed of the rush. And in the version of this argument presented in the Jerusalem Talmud, in the Talmud Yerushalmi, it also adds at the end that the students of Bet Shammai actually slaughtered the students of Bet Hillel on that day. Whether that's historically accurate is something that is difficult to really pin down. But Shammai's strictness is so severe that even though Hillel in his humility decides to see the grounds of Shammai and at the end says, all right, we'll go with your line of argument, the ordinary people can't accept it from Bet Shammai, which is why at the end of the passage says, when they issued the decree, the people did not accept it from them. Because Bet Shammai's Torah was not something that was connected to ordinary people that hadn't taken their worldview into account, it wasn't something they felt they could accept. Before we move on to that final story again of the golden rule and Hillel confronting the convert, one further example of Hillel's humility is quite nice to understand. This one comes from the Gemara in Sota under 48b. In this Gemara, the rabbis are arguing about when it was that the ruach, the idea of the bat kol, this kind of divine voice that would emanate proclamations into the world, when it was that it sort of receded, when it went away from ordinary people. Rav Nehemiah Bar Yitzchak said, who are the early prophets with regards to whom it says that the use of the Urim B'Tumim ceased after their death? The Urim B'Tumim are the sort of stones set in the breastplate of the Kohen Gadol that could also be used to work out certain prophetic messages. This term early prophets serves to exclude Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who were the latest prophets. The Urim B'Tumim was used throughout the First Temple period, up to not including them. The sages taught in a writer. From the time when Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi died, the divine spirit departed from the Jewish people, as these who were considered last of the prophets. And even after the Urim B'Tumim ceased to exist, they would nevertheless still make use of the divine voice to receive instructions from above. On one occasion, the sages were reclining in the upper story of the house of Uriah in Jericho, and a divine voice from heaven issued and said to them, there is one person among you for whom it is fitting the divine presence should rest upon him as a prophet. But his generation is not fit. So even though rabbis have just spent time discussing why is it that we no longer have this idea of bat kol that it left with these prophets, there is one person in the world at this time who would be worthy of hearing it. And who is that? The sages present direct their gaze at Hillel the elder. So they recognized that Hillel was a man of such humility, of such stature, that he was somebody who merited to have the divine voice appear to him. And when he died, they eulogized him in the following manner. Alas, the pious one, alas, the humble one, the student of Ezra. So what we know about Hillel so far, his humility, the fact that he is somebody who came from the people, he was a pauper when he wanted to study Torah at first, and that he believed in the Jewish people so strongly that he made their own ideas the center of his halakhic worldview, is what gives him the honor of leading the Jewish people. With that in mind, we can turn to the story that we looked at the beginning and hopefully start to see it in a different light. And I want to give the story in its full. It is quite lengthy, but it is quite an entertaining story, so strap in, and it does get a bit weird. The sages taught in a writer, a person should always be patient like Hillel, and they should not be impatient like Shammai. The Gemara related this story to prove this point. There was an incident involving two people who made a bet with one another, and they said, anyone who will go and aggravate Hillel to the point that he reprimands him, that he tells him off, that he shouts at him, will win 400 zuz. So the stakes of the bet are made. If you can get Hillel to yell at you, you can win my 400 zuz. One of them said, I will aggravate him. I'm going to win the bet. That day, he chose to bother Hillel on Erev Shabbat, the eve of Shabbat. And Hillel was washing his hair on his head, so he was in the shower. He went and passed the entrance to Hillel's house. And in a demeaning manner, he called out and said, who here is Hillel? Who here is Hillel? Hillel wrapped himself in a towel, he went out to greet him, and he said, my son, what do you need? He said, I have a question to ask. And Hillel said, ask away. The man said, why are the heads of the Babylonians oval-shaped? Great question. He said to him, my son, you have asked a significant question. The reason is because they do not have very clever midwives. They do not know how to shape the child's head at birth. So, okay, whatever. A really weird question. Hillel gives a fairly stock answer. The man went and waited an hour, and then he came back, and he said, who is Hillel? Who here is Hillel? Hillel wrapped himself in a towel outside, went to greet him again. He said, my son, what do you need? The man said, I've got another question for you. He said, ask, my son, ask. The man said, why is it that the eyes of the residents of Tadmor are bleary? Hillel said, you've asked a very significant question. The reason is because they live among the sands and the sand gets in their eyes. The man went away again for another hour. He returned and he said, where is Hillel? Where is Hillel? And again, Hillel wrapped himself in a towel, he went inside, and he said, my son, what do you want? And he said to him, I've got another question for you. Hillel said, ask away, my son, ask away. The man said, why is it that those who come from Africa have wide feet? And Hillel said, you've asked a very significant question. The reason is because they live in marshlands and their feet were widened to enable them to walk through those swampy areas. So this guy's not so far managed to succeed in winding up Hillel, despite the fact that he's asked ludicrous questions about why it is that people from different parts of the world have slightly different features. As a side point, it's worth noting that Hillel's answers also revolve around this theme of circumstantial differences. Hillel doesn't say, well, people in this area are inherently like this, they're inherently like that. Hillel recognizes the common humanity in all these people. He says, well, we're not all so different. It's just that some places are sandy and some places are marshy, and so people have changed a little bit, but he kind of emphasizes that they're all the same. Bit of a side point, but it does relate to that theme of Hillel, seeing the common humanity in all people. So the man spells one at Hillel and says, I have many more questions to ask, but I'm afraid lest you get angry. Hillel wrapped himself and sat before him, and he said, all of these questions that you have to ask them. The man then got angry with him, and he said, are you Hillel, whom they call the Nasi, the Prince of Israel? And he said, yes. He said, if it is you, may there not be any like you in all of Israel. Hillel said, my son, why do you say this? And the man said, I lost 400 ziz because of you. Hillel finally said to him, be vigilant of your spirit and avoid these situations. Hillel is worthy of having you lose 400 ziz and another 400 in his account, and Hillel would not get upset. So Hillel reprimands him in the end and says, I'm a very patient person, you're not going to make me angry like this, and you deserve to lose your 400 ziz. This kind of patience that Hillel embodies here is a bit of a joke at this point in the story, but it becomes really, really important how the story continues further. The sages talk. There was another incident involving one Gentile who came before Shammai. The Gentile said to Shammai, how many Torahs do you have? And he said, 2, the written one and the oral one. The Gentile said, with regards to the written Torah, here I believe you, but with regard to the oral Torah, I don't believe you. I want you to convert me to Judaism only on the condition you will teach me the written Torah, but not the oral Torah. Shammai scolded him and sent him away. The same Gentile came before Hillel. Hillel said he would begin teaching him. On the first day, he showed him all the letters and said to him, this is Aleph, this is Bet, this is Gimel, this is Daled, etc. And then the next day, the guy came back, and Hillel reversed the order. And he said, this is Aleph, and this is Bet. He's going backwards through the alphabet. The convert said to him, yesterday you told me it was the opposite. And Hillel said to him, you see, it is impossible to learn what is written without relying on the oral tradition. Did you not rely on me? Therefore, you should also rely on me with regards to the oral Torah and accept the interpretations it contains. So in this story, rather than Hillel's patience simply being a kind of moral of his virtue, it actually puts him in stark contrast to Beit Shammai. While Beit Shammai says to the convert, you don't understand anything, go away, get out of town. Hillel says to him, I'll come and teach you. And he uses his patience to bring that person closer to Judaism. We can see at the end of the story, he succeeds in converting him. We now come to our story that we know so well. There was another incident where the Gentile came before Shammai and said, convert me on the condition you teach me all of Torah standing on one foot. Shammai pushed him away with the builder's cubit in his hand. The same Gentile came before Hillel, and he converted him on the spot. He said, that which is hateful to you, do not do to another. This is the entire Torah, the rest is interpretation. The genius of Hillel over here is that he gives the student such a simple message, something he can take away, that he can build his entire understanding of what it means to be a Jewish person around this, to be a person who wants to participate in Torah. Unlike Beit Shammai, who ended up sending people away from Judaism or away from Torah in the story, Beit Hillel wants to make an understandable, acceptable version of the Torah, something that can be a linchpin to draw people close to his faith. If we move to the end of the story, the way the story ends, very, very kind of beautifully, is the Gemara relates, this is the final couple lines of the source. Eventually, all these 3 converts gathered together in one place, and they said, Shammai's impatience sought to drive us away from the world. Hillel's patience brought us beneath the wings of divine presence. By making a love of all the Jewish people, and a love of even people who hadn't yet converted to Judaism, and an assumption that they too could be an important part of the Torah process, essential to his Torah study, Hillel not only was able to bring people close to Judaism, just like he said in that quote, but he was also able to change the way we think about halakha, by making it something that takes into account for ordinary people, people who live their lives every single day as Jews can access. Just to finish off and to kind of give you a summary then of the legacy of Hillel's Torah, the final source that I brought is from Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz's book, Talmudic Images, where he gives a little portrait of many of the key figures in the Talmud. He closes the chapter on Hillel by saying, Hillel's life was full of sharp transitions. He came from a noble family in Babylon, the land of Israel, where he first lives in poverty, eventually becoming the ruler and leader of Israel. These changes of status and location from one to another formed Hillel's complex approach to the world around him. He used lofty language along with simple folk proverbs, stories drawn from life and descriptions of everyday reality. In setting and establishing the states of the Torah stages, he created a new aristocracy, but he was also the first to attempt to breach the walls of the Bet Midrash, making it open and accessible for all. It was he who abolished the tuition fees, so those entrance payments that he never wanted to have to pay in the first instance, that he couldn't afford to. And he made the study of Torah available to the poor, And he said about them that from them Torah would go forth. The creation of an aristocracy based on the merit of Torah study, ecstatic devoutness, and combined with the ability to relate to all human beings, these are among the defining characteristics of the elder. If we can take one message from Hillel's life, I hope it is that we can try and see Torah as a way of bringing other people close to Judaism, close to Hashem, and close to each other. And to remember that when we share Torah with one another, we try and see it as an act of love, and that we center our love for other Jewish people at the very, very core of our Torah messages. I know this was a theme that meant a lot to Josh, and hopefully in Josh's memory, we can dedicate this learning tonight. There should be an Aliyah for his neshama, Yoshy Yarzheit, then Yonathan, Chaim, Mark, Esther. And thank you for listening.
Hey,
Thank you, Aaron. In I think it's about January this year, so January 22, we started learning every Monday night by Aaron. We learned to Hillel once a week. Aaron teaches me and Mandy and Richard and tomorrow. His knowledge is fantastic. We learn every week in Joshua's memory, and it's important for us tonight that Aaron did it about Torah in the way of Ishmael of Joshua. So thank you very much, Aaron. Beautiful. Alia, over to you, darling.
Hello, everybody. If I was to ask you when the Torah was seen Moshe Rabbeinu being a great leader, a common answer would be when he led Bnei Israel out of Mitzrayim. However, this is not what I want us to focus on. My focus this evening is about Moshe during Parshat Shemot. As it says in Perek Bet, Pasuk Yud Aleph, and observe their burdens. Moshe saw the pain of the Bnei Israel being slaves. According to the Midrash, Moshe spoke to Paro asking him to provide a day of rest for the Bnei Israel. Paro eventually agreed, and it just so happened the day Moshe gave to the Jewish people was Shabbos. What can we learn from this? Before Moshe knew that he was part of Bnei Israel, he cared for them unlike any other mitzvah. This was something in his nature, something we can appreciate in him. It doesn't matter who the person is, and she treats everybody with care and kindness. Joshua did just that. He had a kind heart for everyone that was in his life. From chatting about Liverpool with Amitai and his cousins, to sitting with our late grandparents, spending time with Grandpa Neville and Grandma's Abby and Debs. Plus every Jew, no matter their level. In Perek Bet, Pasuk Yud Bet, Moshe asks men from Bnei Israel who were fighting, why would you strike your fellow man? Moshe cannot understand why someone wants to hit or hurt somebody from their own nation. Again, we see Ben Adam Lechaveram. Joshua expressed his love for the four of us very clearly. We always knew who he could go to for a cuddle. I don't know many guys in their 20s who express their love for their parents and siblings like our Joshy did. In Perek Gimel, the Midrash states, Moshe showed compassion towards the thirsty sheep. Hashem says the person who shows compassion for a helpless animal will show his compassion for a whole nation. This is when Hashem first appeared to Moshe, to appoint him as a leader over Bnei Israel. He asked him to remove the shoes, just as the Kohanim did in the Bet Midrash, and today the Kohanim removed their shoes for Duchanim. Joshua took his responsibilities as a Kohen very seriously, as well as an older brother to Liatanai. Joshua would always initiate to us both what gift to buy mum and dad for all and any occasion. Joshua also took his responsibilities as a madrich very seriously, showing the students on Waymore Israel his love for Eretz Israel, helping them to be inspired to grow their love for Israel. On top of that, it was just as important for him to learn and for them to learn all about football, especially the Euros which were taking place at that time, bringing them to watch all the games and teach them all the football chants and Tehillim. Joshua took responsibility of being an Orthodox Jew and Orthodox seriously by leading the group with Havdalah. In Joshua Freddie, I see Moshe Ha'eved, a total natural leader, purely by having a good heart. Moshe was called an Eved, a servant which had been put on such a high madriga. Personally, I feel our Joshua served Hashem just like the true tzaddik he was. All he ever wanted to do was inspire others of Torah wisdom, connect fellow Jews through football in university, for example, and spread positivity with his passion for mental health. On the 23rd of September 2021, just before Joshua took ill in hospital, he shared a post on social media of one of his favourite football players, Mo Salah, wearing a t-shirt saying "Never give up." Joshy commented, "To me, this really was beautiful to see, because this is something I live by. No matter how hard things are, no matter how difficult your day or week was, you really want to give up on everything, never give up. You only have one life and you deserve to make it count." And Joshy did just that throughout his life and in and out of hospital, and especially when he was in hospital last year. I give you all the bracha to wake up like a lion and never give up when life gets tough.
I'm really sorry if I'm not loud enough, but using my volume. Joshua, our wonderful, beloved, inspiring son, brother, nephew, cousin, and friend. Joshua, you've always wanted to share your joy with everyone and made everyone you've met feel special. I would like to tell you a few memorable stories about Joshua over the years, and from a young age, his kindness, determination, and inner strength that made him the special, inspirational young man he became. Joshua was only 6 years old at Leeds Grammar School. It was the annual poetry competition. Joshua chose a lovely poem, Night Sounds by Roger Stevens. Joshua practiced the poem every day after school. He took his schoolwork very seriously. The day of the competition, all the parents gathered in the school hall. Each boy was called out alphabetically to recite their chosen poem. Joshua's name the teacher kept calling, but he stayed hidden under my chair as he was too timid to come out. We tried to coax him, but he wouldn't come out, whilst the teacher carried on calling boys' names who recited their poems. Eventually, we got to the end, and the head teacher and the head of the main school took Joshua outside and gently persuaded him. Joshua stood at the front of the hall and recited his poem so eloquently. The headmaster acknowledged what Joshua had been through medically and how big of a deal it was for him to get up and recite his poem, and wrote to him personally at what a major accomplishment he had achieved. Joshua then went on to public speaking regularly at school, taking drama GCSE, gaining an A, and having a major part in the school play. B'nai Kiva and later at JSOC events, it didn't faze him ever again. An example of how far Joshua had come whilst at university, he was personally awarded the Society Event of the Year, the whole of Leeds University campus. Joshua's love for football and of course Liverpool FC. At B'nai Kiva, Joshua started the annual FIFA tournament at the Salford Byett. This entailed Joshua and Johnny, as soon as Shabbat went out in the winter, schlepping TVs, FIFA discs, PlayStations, extension leads to the Byett. Every year, Joshua ran various fantasy football leagues. He used to encourage as many friends and family as possible to join in, starting so many WhatsApp groups to discuss football. Joshua and his passion for football, he wanted everyone to enjoy it too, and included everyone. This went on to years later at university. Wanting to start a Jewish football team, he became a founder member of Hapoel Hyde Park, and how it has grown so much now. Aaron Black, who was at university with Joshua, was so inspired by him. He's grown this to the first ever year of student sport, involving all Jewish students across the UK. We only recently heard a story about a student from Wickham whose grandma is Israeli. This young man came to Hapoel Hyde Park tryouts. He then started joining Jewish campus events, and now he's having his bar mitzvah, which he didn't have at age 13. A first for Hapoel Hyde Park and Leeds Jewish students, an example of the legacy Joshua has left behind. I would like to thank all our family and friends here in Israel and in England. You've been so emotionally supportive and understanding to us, checking in with us and genuinely caring for us. It is overwhelming how wonderful and blessed we are to have you all. Joshua, we miss you so much. There are no words. In everything I do, I always have you in my mind. You have left a big, giant footprint in everyone's lives.
So we've learnt in Joshua's memory and we've heard some stories about Joshua, so now that's our time to do the memorial prayer.
בעבור שנתבו צדקה בעד הזכרת נשמתו וגן עדן תהי מנוחתו לכן ברחמים יסתיר וסתת כנפיו לעולמים ויצרו חיים את נשמתו אדוני ונחלתו וינוח על משכבו בשלום ונאמר אמן. וכן אני בן יקש שאומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות בישראל לפיכך יובא להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר אדוני יכבד סימן צדקו ויגדל תורה ויעביר.
יגדל ויקדש שמר רחמן ואמר דיבח יבצע ויאמר וחצה וחיים פון ומפון וחיי פון בית ישראל גד אבי זמן קוראים אמרו אמן. יבורך ישתבח יתברך ויתרומם ויתנשא ויצלם, ויצלם, שמי לקדושו ברכו, ויעלה מנקו וחצה ושירתה, ושמחצה ונחלצה, אמירה ויאמר נברו אמן. על ישראל וירבנות ויעל תלמידיהו, ויעל כל תלמידיהו, ויעל כל מנדסקי וירמייתא, דיברה כתישעני ודיבו כל עצה ויצא, ויהי לכל וכל הסלם הרבה, דינה משיסתה ורחמי, וחיי וביטהו צוני וביטוי, יהי שלם הרב ושמי וחי ולמים עלינו יעקב ישראל אמן. ונעשה שלום ונאמר ונעשה ברכה שלום על יעקב ישראל אמן. That concludes the full part. So please have yourselves something to drink, a hot drink, alcoholic drink, some cake. Please stay and